everybody, welcome to the channel. I'm Dan. Let's get right to it. When you clicked on the thumbnail, you saw a whole bunch of junk hanging off this lifting beam right here. We're going to break down the components, and by the time you're done with this video, you're going to have a great education on rigging and lifting. First off, you have to rig a load before you lift a load. Second, most people do lifting in any day of life. Whether you raise your arm up and down, you're using physical principles. Some of our wonderful subscribers and viewers here, they work with lattice boom cranes, telescopic cranes. They work with tower cranes. They work with little house cranes, shop cranes. Lifting is part of life. Lifting safely is a very important part of life, and that's what we're going to get into today. First off, wear the proper clothing. Wear pants. If you're going to wear shorts, just be careful that you're in the right zone. We live in Florida, so the big joke is as long as you have your steel-toed flip-flops, you're good to go for any kind of lift. I've got boots on right now. I've got long pants and a shirt. If I were going to do something that's overhead, I would put a hard hat on. It's totally your choice as to what you do. Anyway, for the intro, we're going to start with the beam first. Mary's going to take the camera. Mary's with us today, my wife Mary. She's going to take the camera and pan it up to the ceiling, and she's going to show you the fair lead in black plate assembly. And this is from our hoist video, for those of you who've seen our hoist video. If not, we'll have a link in the description below. So we are running this program off of our Nutri hoist. It's an 1,100-pound hoist that we have upstairs. It doubles as a hoist and it doubles as a winch. In this configuration, it's used as a hoist. So moving down in, this is what's called a lifting beam. You have a single point of lift in the center, and then you can go off to multiple points on the sides. Now, this particular beam is a homemade beam. You can buy them from $400 to $900 to $2,000 or whatever, and it'd be a solid piece of steel with a welded eye, and you have lifting points and that sort of thing. We only use this occasionally in our garage for our work, so we actually made this. We made this out of an 18-inch piece of 2-inch receiver bar from a tow assembly. These two pieces are actually tow bar extensions with 90 degrees on them. We did some welding on the end here for a truck crane. That's for another video. And we drilled another hole in here, so everything is solid, everything is locked into place. So we have this D-ring receiver on the end, and that provides us a point to hook in to use this as a lifting bar. Notice we use I'll bring this around for you guys. This is a clevis pin that we have in here. You could use a bolt for this sort of thing, and a lot of times people do that sort of thing, but a bolt is designed for tension. A bolt's not designed for shear forces. That's pulling down. So a clevis pin is designed to actually be used in this application. So there's something that somebody might really pick up on today. In addition to that, you might notice these locking pins. And so these are locking pins, and they're just locking hitch pins. Again, they've got a great shear force, and they work very well, and they just keep everything solid so we don't have to worry about anything falling on our heads. So basically, again, a lifting beam is a beam with a single point of lift, and then it's got multiple points down below. What we're going to do is we're going to reverse it, add a couple straps to it. Mary will pause the camera momentarily, and we'll show you the spreading bar configuration, and some of you may be more familiar with that. All right, this is the configuration for a spreader bar. You can't see the headache ball from here, but what we've got are two 6-foot straps, and we're forming essentially an isosceles triangle here. So we've got two equal sides, and then the spreader beam's a little smaller. Ideally, what you want is an equilateral triangle where you have 60 degrees of angle at each point. But in this case, you have multiple lifting points on the top of the spreader bar. Then you have a pickup point in the bottom. You can also do multiple points on the ends when you have other bars. So this just shows another way that you can use this bar that's very handy. It's not handy for us because we don't have the room, but if you're outside with a crane, etc., or you're in a bigger shop or garage, this obviously can really be helpful because this is a very stable setup, and it allows you to hook from multiple points. So Mary's going to pause the video. We're going to take this apart and return it to its lifting beam configuration, and then that way we can move on with our video. Okay, we're back. Now we've just turned this back into the lifting beam configuration. Again, single point of lift on the top with multiples on the bottom. You could put other spreader bars on either side to do whatever if you have some ungainly pipe or whatever you do. Anyway, while we're taking this apart, we're going to take this stuff apart and get into the different kinds of shackles. But while we're here, hey look, we're primarily a hurricane prep channel. But the reason why we're doing this sort of thing is because The best preppers are those that have mechanical aptitude and training in this stuff, because if you know how to move things, lift things, take care of things, fix things, it really gives you a leg up when you're taking care of your house during any kind of storm. Actually, when you're prepping for any kind of storm, and definitely during any cleanup that you may have to do after the storm. So that's what we're going to do. So now we're getting set for the next set. Mary's going to take the camera over to the desk, and we'll talk about the different kinds of shackles. All right, so these are the different kinds of shackles that you see here. We've got a 3/4, a 5/8 shackle. This would be a 5/8 D-ring shackle. This would be a 1/2 inch shackle and a 7/16 shackle. This is a clevis. Now, all of these are clevises, but not all clevises are shackles. So according to Reed Supply, a clevis is generally something you see that either lifts or pulls something, but you can't do any side loading on it. If you take a strap and you pull here and you pull here, you could spread this thing apart and possibly shear this pin, instant load failure. Now this thing is rated, it has a WLL, which is a working load weight, and that is 10,000 pounds. So this thing can lift 5 tons straight up like this. That's wonderful, but you can't side load this thing. So these are generally quick, they're for temporary stuff, and they're for pulling along with a tractor or doing different things. They're not necessarily designed for lifting in a configuration that you would see a shackle used for. If a shackle is set up, you can pull a strap here and a strap here, and it's designed to work at that. If you do that sort of thing with a clevis, you have a clevis and you put a strap over here, a strap over here, you're going to bind, and it's possible if the load's heavy, it'll spread this open. Boom, there's your failure. So that's one thing to remember. Every shackle that's made, a quality shackle, will have a working load limit on it. This has 4 3/4 tons. You can't see it because it's black. And it's a 3/4 inch shackle. This is called a screw pin shackle. The pin screws into it. Now what I generally do, and what Mary and I do when we work, is we'll screw the shackle in and back off a 1/4 turn, just so it doesn't bind up while we're working. But we work with loads that are way below the ratings of these shackles. If you're working near the rated limit, the WLL of the shackle, you'll want to tighten these up, because if you are working with multiple straps or chains or slings and you try to pull this thing apart, this binds that bow. This is called the bow and this is called the screw pin. This binds that bow together and keeps the bow from spreading. Now we have a 5/8 shackle here, working load limit, and this says this is 3 1/4 tons. We don't have a marking on here, but we'll assume that it's about the same. Now with a screw pin shackle, they're set up like this. This is a D-ring shackle. It's got a bolt, a retaining bolt, plus a clip. These are used for permanent locations where vibration might be a factor, and what they do is they're designed to not loosen up. So that's an important consideration. It just happened to come with the setup that we had. We would never put 3 1/4 tons on this. We'd never put a 1/2 ton on this. But for our purpose, they work very well. This here is a little 1/2 inch shackle, and you'd be surprised how much we do with that little thing. The working load limit is 2 tons. Finally, we go down to 7/16. The working load limit on that is 1.5 tons, which is just unbelievable, but you can do that. Now, this is not a shackle. This is a C-clamp. And the reason why I bring this up, and if Mary will pan the camera over, I talked about the tractor earlier in the video. You can imagine you're on the farm or you're at your property, you have your tractor bucket, you bring it up and you clamp this to your tractor bucket, and then you raise it up the air, and then you take a rope and you put it through it and you use it as a pulley to lift stuff. We've all done it. We've all been able to move and lift and hold things in that configuration, but this is not a pulley. This is a clamp. This is not a proper way to lift something. And this is why we're bringing this stuff to you, because a lot of people still do this kind of thing, and it's real easy to get hurt. So please don't do that sort of thing, okay? Now, when you're working with shackles, you want to have a tool with you. If you're going to work and you're going to tighten this thing up, we have an iron worker wrench here. You can take it and just tighten that pin. When you're ready, you could use something smaller too. You can loosen that pin. So people complain it's a pain to do this, just have a wrench or have anything on hand to be able to do that sort of thing. So Mary's going to pause the video and we'll get set up for our next configuration. Hey, we're back. All right, we're just going to talk a little bit about safety and maintenance. This will only take a minute. Most people in the smaller garages and shops, they don't use cable chokers and slings. So if you want to see those, you can learn about that on the internet or watch another video, that's fine. Usually people in our world here use chains, they'll use ropes, or they'll use fabric slings. So with regard to chains, this here is a grade 80 chain. It's got a tag on it. If anything has a tag, be it a cable or chain or a sling, try to keep the tag intact. This says it's got a working load limit of 3,500 pounds. It's a grade 80 chain. It's 930 seconds. And we actually put 2 logging choker chains on there. When you work with a chain, some people don't realize this. You don't just grab it and bunch it all up and do this sort of thing and throw it down to the ground. We used to have a guy we worked with named George during cleanup in Hurricane Ian down in South Fort Myers. That man could put a knot in a straight bar. I tell you, he was unbelievable. He could pick up a chain and he wouldn't pick it up right. He'd throw it down at the base of a tree. When we go to retrieve it, inevitably it'd hold up the program because we were taking knots out of the chain. So when you're dealing with something like this, ideally, you pick the chain up in a neat fashion and you can take it, walk to where you need to, do whatever, but it's not all knotted up. When you go to lay it down, it seems simple, but many people don't realize this. Lay it down and then spread the hooks out so you can always grab the hooks and be done so you don't make a mess out of it. When it comes to the slings, every sling should have a label. Most of them do. Sometimes people cut them off. This says this thing has a working load capacity of 10,000 pounds, and that's in the basket assembly. These slings are strongest when they're using a basket configuration. Most people will do a straight pull. In that case, this thing's good for about 3 1/3 tons, and other times you'll see people double them up and put them at an angle, etc. So keep them clean. If you drag these through the mud and the dirt gets inside the fabric. As these bend over time, remember, dirt's basically rocks. It'll cut the fibers over time. So if you're going to do something that's really muddy, use a chain, clean it off. We do a lot of hurricane cleanup, so we'd be dragging things, and we'll be using chains for that. We try to keep the slings out of the dirt and the mud. We recommend the same. And again, don't just do this sort of thing when you're working with them. Treat them with care, because remember, these things are keeping you from being killed during a lift. Just treat them with respect, and they'll treat you with respect. When it comes to other straps, these are wheel tie downs, and we use these for little lifting straps in our configuration. Again, keep them clean, make sure the collar is good. And the last thing to remember is whenever you lift something, you have a chain, a sling, wire rope, fabric sling, rope, whatever, you can damage the load. So always protect the load. You might need to use towels, special cushions, but do what you can so that whatever you're using to lift your load doesn't damage your load. If you're working on a piece of fine furniture, pad it up first before you lift it so you don't damage it while you're working with it. Mary's going to pause the video and we'll get into the next part. All right. Archimedes once said, our famous Greek friend, give me a lever long enough plus a good fulcrum and I can move the earth. And when you're dealing with a lot of this stuff, you're dealing with simple physics. A lot of it is just fulcrum. A lot of it is levers and weights. And that's what a pulley is. A pulley is simply a lever with a fulcrum. Now with a simple rope pulley, every rope, even the cable here, has a lay to it. It's got a twist. Whenever you work with it, I don't know if Mary can see this in the camera, but when you lift up, you notice how the chain twists? So all this stuff twists. You've got to take that into account when you're doing lifting, okay? That's why it's nice to lift with slings and chains, etc. They don't tend to swivel like cables and ropes do. Now I'm lifting this up. Let's say that weighs 10 pounds. It's going to take me 10 pounds of force to pull on this pulley to be able to lift that load in the air. I can add another pulley to this, and we'll pause the camera in a second to do that and show that we can take a load, and if we add another pulley on it, it'll take longer to pull this, but it'll be half the effort. So Mary's going to pause the video and we'll set that up. All right, now we've got a second pulley set up. We've got the first pulley here, and then we put a second pulley down here and a load. Now this load, let's say, weighs 20 pounds, which it doesn't, but let's say it weighs 20 pounds. It only takes 10 pounds of effort to move it down instead of 20 pounds of effort, but it only moves half as fast. So you have to have more rope. But this is an idea that you can use when doing storm cleanup or lifting in a garage or a shop, that some people don't realize how you can use this sort of configuration. So we're just trying to show this. Very simple, very easy, very safe. Mary's going to pause the camera and we'll do the next setup. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about hoists versus winches. It's real simple. This is a hoist. You can't get it any simpler than this. You generally do lifting or lowering. That's it, up or down. When you're dealing with a winch, you can go up or down, at an angle, side to side. So that's the difference between a hoist and a winch. And boy, it's hard to hold these kinds of papers in the Florida humidity, but that's the difference between a hoist and a winch. Okay, so if you look at the center of the screen here, this is a worn winch, or it could be a worn hoist because it can be used as a hoist or a winch. In this configuration, this portable worn winch is being used as a hoist. It can lift up and it can lift down. Now you can take this and hook it to the bumper of your truck, and it's got 15 feet of cable, and you can pull a log, you can pull branches, and you'll be using it as a winch. Look at it this way. Let's say you're driving your vehicle, for some reason it goes off a small bridge in the backwoods. A tow truck comes over, puts out their extendable boom, they drop the cable down, they are hoisting your car out of the water and back up onto the bridge. Now let's say you're out in the woods with your four-wheeler, you get stuck in the mud and you have a winch on the four-wheeler. You free spool it, you run the winch cable out, you put it around a tree, you winch yourself out. So you're using the same kind of drum mechanism that the tow truck had, but you're not performing a hoisting function, you're performing a winching function. So hopefully that'll help people to discern the difference between a manual hoist and a manual winch. And it's the same if they're automated or electric, the same principle applies. When you're dealing with a hoist and you're dealing with a cable or a winch cable, a lot of you may be familiar with this, you can have a snatch block with you. This is a roughneck snatch block from Northern Tool. It's a 2-ton snatch block, and this is a 1,000-pound winch. You can take this snatch block and separate it, and then you could run the cable through it. Tighten it back up, and you can end up hooking it to something, and you've essentially turned a 1,000-pound hoist or winch into a 2,000-pound hoist or winch. Because just like that pulley, the rope pulley I showed you, you've got two cables working now, each taking half the load. So if you're pulling a 1-ton load, or excuse me, let's say a 500-pound load, there's only 250 pounds of weight on each of the two cables. So that's just another thing to remember. Mary's going to pause the camera, and then we're going to look at each end of our lifting beam, and we'll talk about those manual hoists. All right, I'm going to put a hat on so I don't accidentally bang my head on this here lifting beam. This here is a Harrington CX 1/4-ton chainfall hoist. It's a manual hoist. It's designed for up and down configurations mainly. There's a lot of chains to it, so I'll just break it down. In the back is what's called a drive chain. There's a cam that runs here, and there's a planetary transmission in here, and through gear reduction, this thing is designed to lift a 1/4 ton, which is 500 pounds. Here's the chain here. When I pull the lift chain, you may not be able to see it in the camera, but when you pull on the chain, you can see this chain going up. When I pull on the other side, you can see the chain going down. This has a 10-foot throw. That's what this means. This thing can reach up to 10 feet. So at the time we bought two of these things are about 500 bucks a piece. They are not cheap. They're some of the best little hoists out there, but when we were lifting attic ladders and heavy stairs day in and day out, we used only the best, because once you get into overhead lifting, you don't want to use cheap thrift shop junk. When your life is in line, you've got things that weigh hundreds of pounds hanging over your head. So that's why we have these. Now, depending on what you're doing in your garage, you can buy the exact same kind of thing for like 50 bucks off of Amazon. There's some very high quality hoists out there, chainfall hoists. For our situation, we wanted it to be small. It's a surgical precision we were looking for, and it cost big money. But you can get $40, $50, $100 hoists that do a fantastic job. One thing you won't get on those is one thing that's patented in this rig, and it's this wheel that turns. So you could actually lift off from the side, and you don't have to worry about the chain, the chain here that drives this thing binding up, because this is actually designed to move 360. So you can be moving sideways and the chain is always going to pull nice and easy. So that's one of the fancy features, and that's part of what we paid for, because usually The more money you pay for these things, the better quality you get. But it all depends on what you need and what you want. It was a life and death thing for us, but when you're lifting, moving things in the shop, it's going to be a lot different. So, but these are wonderful tools. And again, it's just a matter of pinpoint lifting and pinpoint lowering. And they're just great units. You can even use this upside down. You could have this hook hooked above you and pull from the top. We've done that a few times, but it gets a little cumbersome because the chains kind of get in the way. Now, one more thing about these manual hoists or any hoists, when you're dealing with $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 stairs like we were doing, these electric stair units, you've got to be careful to protect the paint and the surface on those rigs, because these chains, as they move and drag, they could chip paint or they could cause a mar or something. So you want to be careful and always protect your load no matter what you're dealing with. So now we're going to move over to the lever hoist over here. Now a lever hoist this is a Harrington CX quarter ton lever hoist. It's got a little lever on it, and there's a lock tab that will allow us to raise and lower. And again, it can be used as a hoist, but it can also be used as a winch, because this thing can pull from a horizontal configuration, an angle configuration. You can go upside down with it. So these things are very versatile. We used to use them in the crushing plant. We used to use them vertically, horizontally. They're great. And the way they work is simply you select an up or down feature. Initially, we'll select the freewheel feature, and that will allow us to move the chain freely up and down to set it where we want for the load. This particular hoist has a 15-foot throw on it. So we bought it, we paid a little extra. Again, this was about $480. We paid extra for that 15-foot of reach because we found the other two 10-footers we bought lacked. We should have bought 15-footers, but now we've got two 10s and a 15. We got everything we need. So when you're in a free fall situation, you want to be careful not to pull the chain too fast. If you pull the chain too fast, it's possible to cause the handle to start whipping around depending on the make of the hoist, and it could hit you or damage something. So you want to be careful with that. So again, always move slow and deliberate. Once you're locked in place and you're set up to pick a load, you put it in the up configuration, and all it is a ratchet. It works, and I have to hold this, otherwise the beam is going to move all around. You just ratchet and it'll slowly lift the chain up. Now it only moves an inch or an inch and a half per throw, so it doesn't move much. But these again are great for precision areas. When we bought this thing, it came with a little pouch that goes on the side, and you could gather it up and keep it. And pipe fitters, steam fitters would use that. We just threw it away because we didn't have a use for it. But this compact thing, even though it's this small, it does a wonderful job. It lifts 500 pounds. We use it all the time. I always keep it in the van, a little storage case. We keep it cleaned and lubricated. We wipe the chains off. These are wonderful units, and anything like this can be purchased on Amazon or elsewhere. You can get them for a fraction of this price, and they do a fantastic job. So Mary's going to pause the video, and we'll get on to the next piece. All right, the last thing we're going to talk about today is probably the most important thing here that'll really drive home the reason why you want to have some of this education. I use Crosby's User's Lifting Guide, and Crosby's User Lifting Guide is an 18-page PDF document. You can also buy copies on the web. We call it the interweb. What we'll do is we'll put a PDF in the description. We'll put a link out there so you can get this thing. And the important thing is it gives you quick references for shackles and chains and slings, etc. And yes, they're made by Crosby, but they still apply toward almost any lifting application and a lifting tool you need. Now, the most important thing we want to bring up to you today is this little chart. Mara, hopefully you can see that okay there. So what this is it talks about a shoulder bolt, you know, the eye bolts that you usually have up in the ceiling, you can hook things to and lift and do this and that. We're talking about the Crosby G277 bolt and a 1/2 inch eye bolt. If you have a 1/2 inch eye bolt, in a straight line lift, I don't know if you can see this on the screen, you can lift 2,600 pounds. But if you start lifting off of 45 degrees and exceeding a 45-degree angle, did you know that your lifting capacity drops? And you'll see this if you look at page 14 on this guide. Your lifting capacity will drop to only 650 pounds. That means you're expecting to lift more than 1.5 tons, almost 1.5 tons, and you're dropping down to almost 1/4 ton just by changing the angle. Now that may not seem like much, but take a 1/4 inch eye bolt, a little eye bolt. Maybe somebody might bolt up to something in their garage and they can hook a little shackle to it and pull something. That in itself has a lifting capacity straight up and down of 650 pounds. But if you start pulling off to the side, 650 pounds turns into 160 pounds. And that's the reason why we're talking about this stuff. If you have a little bit of education and some experience with how to use this stuff, and if you know where to go, like the Crosby guide here, if you know where to go to learn some of these general principles and you apply them to what you have in your home or shop or work, garage, whatever, you'll be far safer, far more effective, and you'll reduce the number of accidents that you can have, because when you're rigging and lifting, it's really easy to get hurt or killed if you're not careful. Always have a proper point of securement. In our case here, we have a truss garage. We were able to lift over 1,000 pounds. At our last home here, we only lift a few hundred because this isn't set up as a workshop. But hey, Mary and I will take this lifting beam and we'll gladly use it to lift a few hundred pounds to help make our lives easier and do different things. But the principles all apply when we're doing hurricane cleanup or doing whatever. We understand shock loading, we understand cables, we understand chains, we understand not to stretch or overdo anything, and we're asking you to do the same. Take your time, work easy. Thank you very much for watching this video, and we'll see you on the next one.